Hello, brothers, and welcome to Sigma Old Man Channel. When the storm comes, most men pray for shelter. Sigma males sharpen their knives. History proves it. In every collapse, from financial crashes to empires burning, it's not the loudest, richest, or most powerful who endure. It's the ones who adapt fastest and vanish into the cracks. The Sigma male isn't built for comfort. He's built for crisis. While others cling to their routines like a toddler to a broken toy, he treats chaos as his natural habitat. That's why he doesn't just survive disasters. He often walks out of them stronger, calmer, and occasionally amused that everyone else thought the world was ending. This isn't about cliché lone wolf toughness. It's about a rare type of man whose very wiring makes him untouchable when everything familiar burns. And tonight, we're peeling back the psychology of why Sigma males can survive any crisis, while the rest scramble for someone to save them. Number one, they're self-amusement engines. Most men fall apart the moment their routines are stripped away. When the world slows down, when entertainment shuts off, when the noise of society fades, they start to wither because they can't sit with themselves. The silence eats them alive. But a Sigma male is wired differently. He's his own source of stimulation. He doesn't depend on the world to keep him occupied. He carries his own amusement wherever he goes. That's why in times of crisis, when others are crawling up the walls in boredom or losing their minds in isolation, he's strangely composed, even thriving. A Sigma can dive into projects nobody else sees value in, writing, learning obscure skills, breaking down complex ideas just to challenge his own mind. He doesn't need constant validation to make what he's doing feel worthwhile. That self-generated drive turns a crisis into something less like punishment and more like extra space to expand. While others binge on fear and wait for normal life to restart, he quietly builds, learns, and sharpens his edge. By the time the dust settles, he's leveled up, and everyone else has only wasted time. It isn't just productivity, though. Sigmas have this uncanny ability to treat solitude like an old friend. Where most men confuse alone with lonely, the Sigma draws energy from being left to himself. This is why external chaos never strips him bare. The very thing that destroys others, the loss of distractions, the forced stillness, is where he finds his calm. That's survival on a psychological level, and it's rare. Humorously enough, while society panics about running out of things to do, the Sigma almost welcomes it. He's the type to find himself amused at how desperate people are for entertainment, when his mind is already a universe of ideas, experiments, and private victories. And that's the quiet advantage. He doesn't just keep himself stable, he grows more dangerous while everyone else weakens. In crisis, strength isn't always about brute force or resources. Sometimes it's about who can survive their own mind without needing the world to babysit them. That's why the Sigma male's ability to generate his own amusement is not a small quirk. It's one of his most powerful survival traits. Number two, they see crisis as rebalancing, not ruin. For most people, a crisis feels like the end of the world. They see collapse as failure, as if life has betrayed them. But a Sigma male doesn't see it that way. He sees every crisis as a rebalancing act, a reset button that exposes what was weak, fake, or unsustainable all along. When systems fall apart, when routines break, when illusions crack, he doesn't cry about what's lost. He notices what's finally revealed. To him, crisis is not ruin, it's clarity. This is where the Sigma separates himself from the herd. Most men fight to hold on to comfort, even if it was already destroying them. They cling to jobs that drained them, relationships that trapped them, and systems that exploited them, just because those things gave them a sense of stability. The Sigma doesn't make that mistake. He understands that stability is usually just a polished cage, and when it breaks, he doesn't mourn the bars, he studies the open space. That mindset makes him almost unshakable because he doesn't depend on illusions to feel safe. A Sigma male actually finds opportunity in collapse, not because he's heartless, but because he sees reality stripped of noise. When everyone else is panicking, desperate for things to go back to normal, he's already analyzing the new landscape, spotting gaps and moving in ways nobody else dares to. The herd is stuck waiting for someone to lead them. The Sigma is already building his next foundation while the dust is still in the air. What makes this even more powerful is his calm detachment. He isn't fueled by blind optimism or naive hope. He knows that destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin, and he's comfortable flipping it. While others lose their sense of identity when the system they depended on crumbles, he adapts quickly because he never tied his worth to it in the first place. That's why he survives. For a Sigma male, crisis isn't the end of the story. It's a filter that removes the weak structures and clears the field for the strong to act. Where the average man sees disaster, he sees raw material. And that shift in perspective alone is what allows him not just to survive, but to emerge stronger. Number 3, they build invisible safety nets. Most people spend their energy showing the world how secure they are. They flaunt their bank balances, their properties, their social networks, and their titles, hoping these things will shield them when disaster strikes. But the Sigma male plays a different game entirely. His safety nets aren't loud, flashy, or designed to impress. They're invisible, crafted in silence, stored in places nobody looks, and built out of things that can't be taken from him when the surface-level world collapses. The Sigma invests in skills because he knows they can't be stolen or devalued overnight. While others rely on systems to validate their worth, he masters abilities that remain useful no matter what climate he's thrown into. If money loses meaning, skills still buy survival. If structures fall, knowledge still commands respect. He doesn't brag about these tools, he simply sharpens them in private, knowing one day they'll speak louder than wealth ever could. Then there are the alliances, carefully chosen, deliberately hidden, and never broadcasted. The Sigma doesn't need a massive circle, he needs a handful of high-value connections that aren't obvious to outsiders. These bonds are not built on shallow networking or desperate handshakes. They're forged through loyalty, mutual leverage, and shared clarity. When chaos comes and the surface-level friendships collapse, these quiet alliances become priceless lifelines. And finally, there are the resources nobody sees. Not always physical, not always financial, but strategic. Fallback plans, hidden reserves, escape routes, and untraceable options that don't get posted online or bragged about in conversation. These reserves only reveal their worth when the world burns, when the flashy assets everyone paraded suddenly turn to dust. What makes the Sigma's safety net so powerful is its invisibility, because nobody can see it, nobody can sabotage it. He doesn't invite envy, and he doesn't give anyone the satisfaction of knowing his real position. By the time others realize how prepared he was, it's already too late. He's miles ahead, calm, collected, and untouchable. That's the Sigma's quiet genius. He doesn't prepare for crisis to look strong. He prepares for crisis because he knows strength is worthless if everyone can see where it's stored. Number 4, they treat stability as an illusion. Most men cling to the idea of stability like it's a promise written in stone. They convince themselves that jobs will always pay, governments will always function, and relationships will always last if they just play by the rules. That's why when the floor suddenly caves in, panic sets in. They built their entire lives on the fantasy that normal was permanent. The Sigma male doesn't suffer from that illusion. He knows every system, no matter how strong it looks, is built on fragile foundations. To him, stability isn't real, it's just a temporary arrangement waiting for its expiration date. This awareness changes everything, because he never assumes the ground beneath him is solid. He doesn't get blindsided when it cracks. A market crash, a betrayal, a sudden collapse in structure. These things shock the majority, but to the Sigma, they're just reminders of what he already knew. Nothing lasts forever, so he doesn't live like it will. That detachment gives him a steady hand when the world unravels, while everyone else is paralyzed by disbelief. What makes this perspective powerful is that it forces him to live prepared without becoming paranoid. He doesn't hoard supplies or obsess over doomsday scenarios. Instead, he builds himself to be flexible. If one path is blocked, he moves to another without hesitation. If a system collapses, he doesn't waste time grieving over its loss. He's already working within the new reality. The average man tries to protect stability. The Sigma treats it as a temporary gift. That's why he rarely overinvests in appearances, status, or routines. He enjoys them while they last, but he never mistakes them for guarantees. His real security is his ability to pivot when the world changes, not in pretending it never will. This mindset may look cold to others, but it's exactly why he survives crisis after crisis. While the herd is busy screaming, "How could this happen?" the Sigma is already walking forward, unshaken, because he never thought stability was permanent in the first place. For him, fragility is the natural state of things. And once you accept that, nothing can truly surprise you. Number 5. They're comfortable in uncomfortable conditions. Most men break down the moment they're pushed outside the warmth of belonging. Being excluded, ignored, or misunderstood feels like punishment to them because their sense of worth is tied to approval. But Sigma males have lived their entire lives on the edges of groups, often misread or underestimated, and it never crushed them. Instead, it shaped them. That outsider experience becomes their natural armor. So when crisis strips away comfort and forces everyone into isolation, the Sigma is already standing on familiar ground. He doesn't see discomfort as something to escape at all costs. He treats it as part of the terrain of life. Sleeping in uncertainty, walking through rejection, surviving without applause, these are conditions he has practiced long before crisis made them unavoidable. For others, losing social validation or safety nets feels like exile. For him, it feels like Tuesday. That's why he doesn't spiral when things get ugly. He's fluent in discomfort, and that fluency makes him stronger than those who only know how to function when things are easy. What looks like suffering to most people often becomes a workshop for the Sigma's resilience. He can think clearly when others are restless. He can move quietly when others are panicking, and he can adapt to harsh settings without needing constant reassurance. His sense of identity isn't dependent on being included, so when exclusion becomes the default condition in a crisis, he hardly notices. The irony is that the very things society used to shame him for, being distant, withdrawn, hard to figure out, become his survival edge when the world destabilizes. Everyone else is scrambling to adjust to a life without comfort or constant connection, while the Sigma is already at home in those conditions. That's what makes him dangerous in crisis. He doesn't waste energy trying to rebuild a false sense of comfort. He focuses on navigating reality as it is, no matter how harsh. And because of that, the crisis doesn't crush him. It simply extends the world he's always trained to live in. Number 6, they're immune to group fear. Fear is contagious. When disaster strikes, it moves through crowds faster than logic, turning ordinary people into hysterical herds. One person panics, another mirrors it, and suddenly the entire group is operating on raw survival instinct instead of clear thought. Most men get swallowed by this wave because they're wired to seek safety in numbers. But Sigma males are cut from a different cloth. They simply don't inhale that collective fear because they've never breathed the same social air as everyone else. Being detached from the herd gives the Sigma a powerful shield. He doesn't need to look around to see how others are reacting before deciding what to do. That independence severs the emotional feedback loop that drives panic. When crowds are running in circles, chasing rumors, or fighting over scraps, he can keep his head clear because his choices are based on reason, not the trembling energy of the masses. This doesn't mean he feels nothing. The Sigma knows fear, it's a survival signal. But he doesn't outsource his fear to the group. He calibrates it internally, measures it against reality, and acts accordingly. That makes his responses sharper, cleaner, and far more effective than those who drown in the noise of mass hysteria. The irony is that what the herd sees as coldness is actually discipline. While they're busy amplifying each other's anxiety, he's quietly calculating his next move, saving energy instead of wasting it on collective emotional chaos. That's why he doesn't just survive crises. He often navigates them more efficiently than the so-called leaders who crumble under the weight of group pressure. And here's the subtle edge. Fear in groups makes people predictable. Once panic sets in, they stampede in obvious directions. The Sigma, immune to that pull, can move against the current, accessing opportunities others trample past. His immunity doesn't just protect him, it allows him to turn chaos into leverage. When the world shakes and the herd spirals, the Sigma's refusal to breathe in their fear makes him untouchable. He doesn't get swept away by the emotional tide. He remains the rare man standing on solid ground while everyone else is carried off in the flood. Number 7, they carry no fragile identity. Identity is the biggest trap most men walk into. They build their entire sense of self around titles, jobs, and social validation. The executive introduces himself by his position. The influencer clings to his followers. The celebrity survives off applause. It feels solid until crisis arrives and strips those roles away. Suddenly, the executive is unemployed, the influencer is irrelevant, the celebrity is forgotten, What they thought was who they are vanishes overnight, leaving them broken, insecure, and scrambling to rebuild a mask. The Sigma male doesn't make that mistake. He never confuses his identity with the roles society hands him. He can play them if he wants: boss, partner, creator, leader. But he wears those roles lightly, like clothes he can take off at will. His sense of self isn't built on fragile costumes, so when the system collapses and those costumes burn, he isn't standing naked and afraid. He remains intact because who he is isn't dependent on what others label him. That's a powerful survival advantage. In crisis, people who rely on external identity cling desperately to what's gone, wasting energy trying to restore a reality that doesn't exist anymore. The Sigma doesn't cling, he pivots. Since his self-worth was never tied to status or recognition, he adapts without mourning what he's lost. That fluidity allows him to move faster, cleaner, and with less emotional baggage than those trapped in identity crises of their own. This detachment can look cold, even threatening to others. They can't understand how he doesn't seem broken when their own worlds have collapsed. But that's because they never built a core strong enough to exist without costumes, while the Sigma always did. His identity is internal, not borrowed from the outside world, and that's why he survives better than most. Crisis exposes the weak foundations people have been hiding behind, but it doesn't expose the Sigma. It validates him. Where others watch their entire self-image burn, he feels nothing but the same grounded self he's always carried. The masks may disappear, but the man behind them never does. That's why he doesn't just outlast crises, he walks through them without losing himself. Number 8, they're ruthless with dead weight. Most men sabotage themselves in a crisis because they can't let go of dead weight. They stay loyal to people who drain them, protect relationships that no longer work, and carry allies who contribute nothing but chaos. They do it out of guilt, fear of being alone, or because they've confused obligation with strength. The Sigma male doesn't share that weakness. When pressure hits, he cuts liabilities with surgical precision, and he doesn't hesitate because he knows survival demands clarity, not sentimentality. This ruthlessness isn't about cruelty. It's about discipline. The Sigma understands that in crisis, energy and resources are limited. Every ounce wasted on toxic attachments is an ounce taken from his own survival and growth. He refuses to let his life become a charity for people who never earned a seat at his table. If someone proves incompetent, ungrateful, or parasitic, he doesn't keep them around hoping they'll change. He makes the cut, swiftly and cleanly, even if outsiders call it cold-blooded. This brutal selectiveness is what allows him to stay light on his feet while others drown under the weight of people they're too scared to release. He doesn't romanticize suffering together or glorify loyalty to the wrong people. He knows that in times of collapse, the wrong ally can be more dangerous than the enemy. And while others are busy dragging anchors disguised as companions, the Sigma is already moving forward unencumbered. The irony is that the very people who call him heartless in the moment often admire his results later. They realize too late that his willingness to prune his circle wasn't a lack of humanity, but a survival mechanism. It's why he doesn't just make it through crises. He often comes out sharper, stronger, and surrounded by allies who actually deserve to be there. The Sigma's ruthlessness with dead weight is not a flaw, it's his insurance policy. He's not here to sink with others' failures or to babysit those who refuse to grow. He's here to survive, adapt, and thrive. And he knows one truth most men can't swallow. If you don't cut the wrong people loose in crisis, they'll drag you under with them. Number 9, they exploit the desperation of others. Desperation makes people predictable. In times of crisis, fear strips away their pride and their so-called principles, and suddenly they're willing to give up things they once swore were priceless. Freedom, loyalty, dignity. Under pressure, most men will sell them for scraps of comfort or the illusion of safety. The Sigma male knows this, and instead of joining the panic, he positions himself as the one who benefits from it. He doesn't waste time convincing people to calm down. He lets their desperation do the work for him. This isn't about cruelty, it's about clarity. The Sigma understands that panic drives bad deals. People overshare, they overpromise, they surrender leverage just to feel secure for another day. He doesn't even have to push, he just waits in the shadows, watching opportunities come to him. Where others are blinded by fear, he sees clean openings to gain ground. A desperate man is easy to manipulate, not through force, but through silence and timing. And the Sigma, master of both, turns chaos into currency. It could be as simple as extracting loyalty from someone who once resisted him, now too scared to stand alone, or taking possession of resources others neglected when things felt stable, or even gaining influence in circles that previously dismissed him, now begging for someone steady to follow. He doesn't need to ask loudly. Fear makes people hand him power willingly. What separates him from opportunists is restraint. He doesn't exploit recklessly or in ways that burn him later. He takes what strengthens his position without announcing it, without leaving obvious fingerprints. By the time others realize what they gave up, it's too late. He's already built a stronger foundation out of the very panic that crippled them. To outsiders, this looks cold, even predatory. But to the Sigma, it's survival intelligence. Crises expose what people truly value and what they'll surrender when terror clouds their judgment. While most men are crushed under that desperation, he converts it into advantage, quietly and decisively. That's why when the world shakes, the Sigma male doesn't just stay standing, he rises higher on the bargains others were too desperate to see they were making. Number 10, they're ghosts in systems that collapse. When a system begins to collapse, whether it's a company, an economy, or even a social structure, the ones who suffer most are usually the ones who are most visible. They were tied too tightly to titles, dependent on recognition, or deeply embedded in the machine. When the machine falls apart, it drags them down with it. The Sigma male doesn't face that risk because he was never fully in the system to begin with. He operates on the edges, half present but never fully exposed, which makes him ghost-like when collapse comes. This ghost-like quality isn't about hiding in fear. It's about strategic invisibility. The Sigma keeps himself hard to track, refusing to leave obvious trails of dependency or ego for others to latch onto. He doesn't tie his worth to company hierarchies, social networks, or institutions, so when those institutions implode, there's nothing in him to break. He doesn't have to reinvent himself because his core was never tied to their stability in the first place. That distance gives him freedom most men can't imagine. When layoffs hit, when reputations collapse, when entire industries go obsolete, the Sigma quietly detaches and moves on. No panic, no outrage, no desperate scramble to hold on to a sinking ship. His detachment looks almost supernatural to those who can't comprehend living without the system's validation, but it's simply the product of his independence. The irony is that while others see visibility as strength, titles, clout, recognition, the Sigma knows visibility is vulnerability. Being at the center of the system makes you easy to control when it's strong and easy to crush when it's failing. By staying ghost-like, he avoids both traps. He's free to take advantage of the system when it benefits him and free to walk away when it stops. That's why, in times of chaos, the Sigma doesn't get tangled in the wreckage. He slips through untouched, unbound, and unbothered. While others are buried under the weight of the structures they trusted, the Sigma walks out the other side invisible, intact, and often stronger than before. His ghost-like existence isn't weakness. It's the ultimate survival edge. Number 11. They can abandon ego for function. Ego is what destroys most men in a crisis. Alphas, for example, are addicted to their position at the top. The moment they lose their throne, they collapse because their identity was built on being seen as dominant. They'd rather cling to status, even if it drags them down, than take a step that looks beneath them. Sigma males don't suffer from that weakness. They abandon ego the second it becomes dead weight, and they'll take any role, high or low, if it keeps them moving forward. This is one of their deadliest advantages. The Sigma doesn't confuse survival with pride. If he has to lead, he leads. If he has to work quietly in the background, he works. If he has to step into a position most men would see as humiliating, he'll do it without hesitation, because he knows the role doesn't define him. The outcome does. That kind of flexibility makes him dangerous in crisis, because he can move through spaces that ego-bound men won't touch. What looks like a step backward to others is often a calculated repositioning for the Sigma. He doesn't waste time protecting an image. He protects his progress. He can scale down without shame, rebuild without applause, and operate beneath the radar while others are too busy clinging to their old crowns. That ability to shed pride instantly makes him nearly impossible to break, because he never ties his value to being worshipped. People often mistake this for weakness, but it's the opposite. It takes strength to drop the armor of ego and adapt to the reality in front of you. The Sigma understands that clinging to pride in a collapsing world is like holding onto a burning rope. You end up destroyed by the very thing you're afraid to let go of. By abandoning ego, he frees himself to act with pure function, while everyone else is stuck fighting battles just to protect how they look. That's why crisis doesn't crush him. He doesn't have a throne to defend. He has ground to gain, and he'll take it from any position necessary. In a world where pride keeps most men chained, the Sigma's ego-free adaptability makes him unstoppable. Number 12. They anticipate collapse as part of design. Most people live as if the structures around them will last forever. They treat governments, companies, and even cultural trends like unshakable monuments that will always be there to protect them. That's why collapse blindsides them. It feels like betrayal, like something impossible just happened. The Sigma male doesn't live in that illusion. He sees every empire, economy, and trend as temporary. In his mind, collapse isn't an accident, it's part of the design. That perspective changes how he moves through the world. Because he expects decay, he doesn't overcommit to what looks permanent. He uses systems, but he never worships them. He can work in a company, invest in a market, or enjoy a social trend, but he always keeps a part of himself detached, ready for the day it falls apart. That anticipation makes him impossible to trap. While others are scrambling to adjust when things break, the Sigma is already 3 steps ahead because he knew it was coming. This mindset doesn't make him paranoid, it makes him realistic. He doesn't spend his life waiting for disaster. He just doesn't build his identity on fragile ground. That's why he moves lightly, never tying his self-worth to things that can vanish overnight. And when they do vanish, he doesn't waste time grieving like most men do. To him, collapse is just the next phase in the cycle, a natural shift that clears out the old and makes space for something new. What really sets him apart is how he uses this understanding strategically. Because he anticipates decay, he positions himself to benefit from it. He doesn't just survive collapse, he often thrives because he's already laid the groundwork to adapt, while others are still shocked that the collapse happened at all. This perspective makes him unnervingly calm when the world burns. Where the herd screams, "How could this happen?" the Sigma's only thought is, "Right on time." Crisis doesn't destabilize him because it feels like a stage he calculated long ago. That's why he can move in chaos with clarity. He knew it was always coming, and he was always ready to walk through it. When the dust of crisis settles, most men are left shattered, broken identities, wasted energy, and lives tied too tightly to systems that were always doomed to fall. The Sigma male, however, walks out of the wreckage untouched, not because he's superhuman, but because his entire existence is built on truths most people refuse to face. He knows stability is fragile. He carries no ego that can be destroyed, and he thrives in solitude where others decay. He cuts dead weight without hesitation, slips like a ghost through collapsing systems, and turns the desperation of others into leverage. To him, crisis isn't a punishment. It's a confirmation of what he already knew, that only the adaptable survive. What sets the Sigma apart is not brute strength or loud dominance, but clarity. While the herd clings to illusions and crumbles when they vanish, the Sigma treats every collapse as part of the design. He moves lightly, lives independently, and sharpens himself in silence until the moment comes to reveal just how far ahead he really is. That's why no matter the disaster, social, financial, or personal, the Sigma doesn't just survive. He recalibrates, rebuilds, and often rises stronger than before, and that is the uncomfortable truth. In a world addicted to noise, comfort, and validation, the Sigma male proves that the man who needs the least from the world cannot be broken by it. He is not waiting for stability to return. He is already moving in the ruins, turning chaos into his element. And when the storm finally passes, he's not the one crawling back to normal. He's the one standing, sharper, calmer, and untouchable. That is why the Sigma male will always outlast the crisis, because for him, survival is not about holding on. It's about letting go and moving forward while everyone else is still afraid to. If you found this breakdown powerful and eye-opening, don't just keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join the community of people who value raw truth over clichés. Drop a like if this resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below, and pass this video on to someone who needs to hear it. Every share helps spread the message, and every comment fuels deeper conversations. Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning. There's more unfiltered truth coming your way.